share with you a story from May of 2020. Do you all remember 2020? Yeah. How could we forget, right? So in case there's any of you who need a refresher, here's what was going on in May of 2020. COVID had just hit about a month and a half ago. We still didn't know quite what it was. Here in Arizona, we had just finished our 1-month stay-at-home order that we were sure was going to just nip this pandemic in the bud, and it didn't. There was all of this information and in the news about how much we hated each other and how divided we are and how many disagreements we were having. People were fighting over whether or not we were wearing masks. You remember that? There were protests, there were riots, there's all sorts of things going on. And then in May of 2020, George Floyd was killed. And then 5 days later, a fire broke out in the town of Cave Creek, where I live. My husband and I were able to see the black smoke rising from our house. And so we jumped online, and our community has a Facebook group that's dedicated towards anytime there's disasters, lost hiker, or anybody who needs help in our community, we have a Facebook group dedicated to rallying and organizing volunteers. So we jumped on there and we found out that the fire had actually started in a residential area. And the winds were super high. It was a super hot day. And because it was 2020 and everything that could go wrong did, I don't think we had seen rain since December. So it was dry, it was hot, the winds were high, and this fire looked like it could get out of control really fast. So we showed up to the staging area where they were organizing all of the volunteers. We loaded up a cooler and a case of water that we happened to have so we could keep people hydrated. And there were 40, 50 people who showed up, and this is a small community. I think Cave Creek has a population of maybe 6,000 or 7,000. So there were probably 50 people who showed up to the volunteer grounds. And you see, in Cave Creek, if you're not familiar, it's a more rural area. So people have animals. And I don't mean just dogs and cats. I mean horses and goats and chickens and pigs and cows and donkeys. So when the evacuation order came, we had to not just get people out, we had a lot of animals that we had to get out of the area as well. Neighbors who were outside of the evacuation area were pulling up their corral and fencing and loading it into flatbed trailers and showing up to the staging area to set up temporary housing for all of these animals. The local equine vet donated space on their lot, so we had room to put these horses. Some people, thinking they didn't have enough time, just turned them loose. And for the days and weeks afterward, people were going around riding their horses out in the desert and rounding all of the animals up. We worked and volunteered until probably 9, 10 o'clock at night. And in the end, we evacuated 860 people and over 500 large farm animals. Not a single life was lost in that fire, but 10 people lost their homes. And the local little tumbleweed motel that I think had 8 or 9 rooms that was closed because of COVID opened up their hotel for people who had lost their homes. This is on my mind because of the juxtaposition, the contrast between what the news was saying about how we treat each other and how we feel about each other and all of the fights and the violence that was going on, and yet what I saw in my own community with my own eyes, of people coming together, of donating their time, of donating money, of donating their equipment. People showed up with horse trailers to try and evacuate all of these animals. It was amazing. And so what it reminded me of then, and what it reminds me of now, is that we get a choice in what we focus on. Do we focus on the things that are going wrong, or do we focus on all of the ways things are going right? You see, every day we are exposed to more information more data than our brain can possibly process at once. We see and take in more things through our senses than our brain can bring into our awareness. So what that means is every moment of every day, your brain is filtering what you see and what you hear. Your brain has to make a choice of what's important enough to make it into your awareness and what's unimportant. There's actually a group of neurons right here at the base of your skull where your spine meets your head and the back of your head. It's called the reticular activating system. And its entire job is to filter information to decide what actually makes it into your awareness. And the way that it decides is it brings to your awareness what your brain has figured out is normal. And normal to your brain is whatever you have been sufficiently exposed to. So what that means is that if you're watching content on social media or YouTube or watching TV shows or movies that are filled with chaos or violence or fear or division, your brain decides that's normal. And so it's going to bring more of that stuff into your attention. It literally shows you more of it. So what we focus on is important. This is our third principle, that what we hold in mind is what we create. It is a spiritual truth, but it's also a biological truth. The truth is that if you look for things to be outraged about, you will find them. But the same is true if you look for things to be excited about. If you look for examples of love and compassion and justice, you will find those too. And that's the choice and the power of our consciousness, is that we get to choose what we want to see. We get to train our brains what's going to be normal in our lives and what we want to see more of. From Philippians, it says, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable. If there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. As for the things that you have learned and received and heard and noticed in me, do them, and the God of peace will be with you. So this is up for me right now, this idea of looking for the good and focusing on the goodness in the world and being the change. Because for the last 5 years, I've kind of been wrestling with finding the balance. The balance between looking for the good, but not ignoring the things that are calling for my attention and for healing. Because you see, I want to protect my peace, but I also want to be informed. And so the question for me became, how can I be the change I want to see in the world? How can I use these spiritual principles not only to heal and transform my own life, but also to contribute to the healing and transformation of the planet? So my talk today is called Be the Change. And we're going to explore some spiritual principles about how we can do that. First, I want to say that I believe that what we're seeing going on in our communities and in the country and on the planet is a symptom of the current collective consciousness. The collective consciousness is just the sum, the aggregate, of all of the individual minds. So what that means is that we can change the world by first changing ourselves, because each of us contributes to that collective. And once we hit a certain threshold of a higher consciousness that people are holding, that's when things start to tip. There's something called the Maharishi effect. And what it says is that if 1% of the population in any given place, so 1% of the population of a town, or of a country or of the world. If 1% of the population sits in meditation together, violent crime is measurably reduced. They actually put this to the test and did a study on it to try and measure it and prove it. And so in 1993, they did this in Washington, D.C. They got 1% of the population to sit and meditate together, and they tracked it. And they saw a reduction in violent crime of 23%. In Washington, D.C. at the time, that meant they saved 104 lives. That is the power of the spiritual work that we do. Before we ever take action, before we ever step out the door or post something on social media or get involved with something or donate to something, the consciousness that we hold has that much power. New Thought pioneer H. Emily Cady, you're all probably familiar with her Lessons in Truth. In that book, she says, we must seek to be the truth consciously, to be love, to be wisdom, to be life, and let results take care of themselves. She says, when we are consciously the truth, it will radiate from us and accomplish the works without us having to run to and fro. That is the power of what we do. Our spiritual work is important not only because it helps us cope with life, because it feels good when you're in that oneness of meditation, because it makes us better and heals us. Our spiritual work is important because it changes our communities. It changes our families and it changes the world without us even having to say a thing. Because we are that. We are God in expression. And the more we can be that, it has a tangible impact on the world. So how do we do that? How do we be the truth? Be love, be wisdom, be life, be the change? Would you like to know? Okay, good, because that's what I was planning to talk about. So I think number one, the most important, is that we have to find a balance between the outer noise and our inner pursuit of truth. We have to have time each and every day to detach from all of the things created, to spend time in the presence of the Creator. I think the magic of meditation, the magic of be still and know, sitting in the silence, is its simplicity. You know, there's all these other modalities and practices that we can do as spiritual people, and a lot of them have great benefits. But at the end of the day, if you just sat in meditation with an open heart, truly seeking to know and understand that divine presence within you, that would be enough. The other thing that's powerful about meditation is it's an opportunity where we're sitting and really being with ourselves, with our true essence. It's an opportunity to be brave enough to really see everything that's going on with us and to allow that cleansing and healing power of spirit to wash over us, to heal us and transform our minds. Thich Nhat Hanh says, having a spiritual dimension in our lives does not mean escaping life or dwelling in a place of bliss outside of this world, but discovering ways to handle life's difficulties and generate peace, joy, and happiness right where we are. So it's not about living in the joy of meditation and ignoring everything else. It's about bringing the lessons and the deep wisdom that you learn in meditation and bringing it into your life. I think that each of us, through our unique pasts, our unique perspectives, our unique life experiences, our upbringing, the choices that we make, that's a way that Spirit speaks to us. In meditation, when we're quiet, it's easier to hear those nudges, right? To feel that call, to tap into that wisdom. But Spirit is speaking all the time. And I believe that includes through our emotions. through our gut reactions, through our intuition. It is Spirit speaking to us and calling to us and trying to draw us closer. And so I want to share with you, because I think our emotions are invitations. They're little nudges from Spirit about what we need to look at, maybe what we need to heal or what we're being called to. So I want to share with you some things that I've noticed about myself. That when I see the news, when I hear about the things that have happened just this week, let alone in the last few years, I have these initial human reactions, gut reactions, right? And so what I want to do is share those with you in case some of you have experienced or felt some of the same things that I have. And then I want to look deeper into them and see what the spiritual response to that call is. So the first reaction that I've noticed in myself, I've decided to call disbelief. And I would say this is a feeling of tightness in my chest, but it also comes with thoughts like, I can't believe this is happening. Is this real? How did we get here? And the overall emotion that comes with this sense of disbelief is confusion. The reason why we feel confusion when we see some of these headlines is because our brain's reaction when we are confronted with things that challenge our ideas, our beliefs, our biases, or our worldview, the brain's default reaction is to ignore it, to reject it. And so the feeling of disbelief, the feeling of confusion can be a spiritual invitation into a deeper wisdom. Brené Brown's research shows that the emotion of curiosity is essential for learning and growing. And that's because it causes us to stop and to think. So if you're feeling this disbelief that I've been experiencing, I would invite you to consider journaling. Journaling can be a way to engage our mind, but also be open to that higher wisdom of Spirit as we just pour out our thoughts, even if they're messy, even if they don't make any sense, even if they contradict each other. So it's bringing out that inner wisdom. Disbelief challenges us to consider where we're investing our energy. Are we feeding fear? Are we living in doubt? Are we putting our trust in the world instead of with that one presence? Metaphysically, disbelief and confusion is asking us, are you identified with appearances? With what Charles Fillmore called sense consciousness, just the reality that you can touch with your senses? Or are you identified with that higher spiritual truth that goes beyond understanding? That's your invitation when you feel disbelief, is to sit and consider where you're putting your belief. The second initial gut human reaction that I've noticed myself experiencing, I'm calling apathy. Just nothing. You could say it's shock or numbness. It kind of feels like, well, another day, another statistic. Really what this is avoidance. And avoidance is a coping mechanism that our brain defaults to when we've had too much, when we're overwhelmed. You see, we aren't biologically and psychologically built for being able to hold all of the grief of the world. We are built to be in communities of about 50 people. 50 people that we are emotionally connected to and interdependent on. That's what we are built for. And yet today we have 24 hours, unlimited access to news and all the horrible things that are going on all over the world. Our bodies weren't built for that. So what it causes is something called empathy fatigue. Empathy fatigue is most often seen in healthcare workers, therapists, clergy, and it is the emotional, physical, and spiritual exhaustion that results from chronic exposure to others' pain and trauma. And it actually activates the regions in our brain that are tied to pain, and it can result in PTSD type symptoms even if you didn't directly experience it. So when we feel apathy, or really when we feel nothing, it's a call from Spirit that says you've hit your threshold. You've hit your limit of what you can absorb. And so the question becomes, knowing that, what do I do and how can I keep my heart open? Because we don't want that to be our default state, right? We don't want to bury our heads in the sand and avoid it and just pretend that it's not happening because we feel like we can't handle it. And so neuroscience shows us that the way that we deal with this is actually through something called compassion training. And here are some of the things that some of the techniques that they use for compassion training. One is a loving kindness meditation. So loving kindness is a particular meditation where you are actively giving love into the world. And so you start by the way you start any meditation, which is getting quiet and getting still. And then you bring to mind the face of somebody that you love, somebody that you naturally feel that warmth and that glow when you think of them. And with that feeling conjured up, you send that love to them. And then you go to somebody that you really like, and you send that love to them. And then you hold on to that feeling and you extend that to someone you just kind of know and don't really have a strong opinion about. And you send that love to them. And then you expand that a little bit more into somebody who kind of pressed your buttons this week and you're not too happy with. And you extend your love to them. And it goes out and out and out. This builds compassion and it builds resilience so that we can become more open-hearted and easier able to cope with other people's pain. Meditation is an important part of compassion training as well, because meditation buffers our immune system and buffers us psychologically. Another thing that you can do is set up a small ritual of blessing. And so this can be a really short mantra or phrase, something as simple as, I send love and light to them. And you can use this blessing whenever you notice that you heard a piece of news or read a headline and didn't feel it. It's a way to tune back into your heart and say, I love and bless everyone involved. It becomes an automatic ritual that builds up your resilience and helps you keep that heart open. The other thing that experiencing this flat affect signals is that maybe it's time to turn it off. When you notice that it's not stirring up anything in you, it's time to set a boundary and take a break and reset. And work on self-care practices, things like forest bathing, which living in Flagstaff, you guys actually have trees. Much harder for me to forest bathe. Forest bathing, if you don't know, is just immersing yourself into the forest, hugging a tree, looking at the canopy, laying on your back in those pine needles, immersing yourself in nature builds your resilience, refills your cup so you can show up open-hearted in the world. So you see, I believe these emotions are signals to us. That by being aware of what we're experiencing, of what the events of the world are bringing up in us, it's our invitation into deeper spiritual awareness and growth. So this third thing that I've noticed in myself, I'm calling righteous indignation. This one tends to be my favorite. So righteous indignation is anger, right? But it also comes with beliefs and thoughts that I have the right answers. I know what's wrong here. I know the solution. And if only they would just blank, everything would be better. Okay, so here's an interesting thing about how our brains work. Every person, whether you're conscious of it or not, you have in your mind an in-group and an out-group. The in-group are the people who are like you in whatever way that may be. And the out-group are the people who aren't like you. Guess which group you prefer? So what's interesting is researchers have studied this because they wanted to see how far does this go, right? Do we really treat our in-groups and our out-groups differently? And what does it take for somebody to be part of our in-group? Is it if they look like me? Is it if they vote for the same people as me? Is it if they grew up in the Midwest like me? Like, what makes an in-group? What makes an out-group? So here's the experiment that they did. They took a sheet of paper and put a bunch of dots on it. And then they gave that sheet of paper to participants and only gave them like 10 seconds to estimate how many dots were on the page. Okay, so they didn't have time to count them all. Just look at this page with all of these dots and guess how many there are. So when the participants turned in that page, the researchers, at random, unbeknownst to the participants, at random they would tell them, you underestimated the number of dots, or you overestimated the number of dots. Okay? So then the next part of the experiment was they gave one of the participants money. And they said, your job is to distribute this money to the other participants in this study. And the only thing that they knew about their other participants was whether they were underestimators or overestimators. They found that an underestimator who had the money gave other underestimators 36% more than overestimators. You give an overestimator the money, they give other overestimators 36% more than underestimators. This is ridiculous, isn't it? The only thing that they had in common, one wasn't even true because the participants assigned it at random. The only thing they had in common with these other people was that they both happened to under or overestimate the number of dots on a page. I mean, how much more inconsequential and pointless could you get? And yet, they favored their in-group more. So how much more do you think you favor your in-group that's based on upbringing, values, politics, career? This is something that's built into our brain. It is something we all do. And so the spiritual response to righteous indignation, if only those people would just blank, is to consider who we've put in our outgroup. It's to consider who we have hardened our hearts against. To look at who we are excluding, who we are separating ourselves from. Because even if they're in your outgroup, they are still an expression of God. Yes? Even if you don't understand where they're coming from, they're still deserving and worthy of love and respect. Yes? So when I feel my righteous indignation, I see it as an invitation from Spirit to really sit with that and look at it. It invites me to look at who I've hardened my heart against, who I'm excluding from my circle of love. And the other thing it invites us into is to look at what's underneath our anger. Brene Brown's research found that anger is almost always a secondary emotion, meaning that underneath our anger, there is another emotion that we're trying to ignore. And so we cover it up with anger. Anyone ever experienced that? So she says typically it's something that's harder to deal with, like grief or guilt or despair. Anger is an important emotion because it spurs us into action. But as spiritually minded people, we need to ensure that our anger doesn't spur us into reaction, but into inspired action. And the only way we move from righteous indignation or anger into inspired action that's going to contribute to being the change we want to see is to first stop and pause. Sit with it in meditation. Allow your heart to be open to it. Be okay with being the person who sometimes think they're more enlightened than other people. And if other people would just get on board, everything would be fixed. It is okay to feel whatever you are feeling. Feeling that way doesn't make you a bad person. Having judgmental thoughts doesn't make you a bad person. We are human. We have human reactions to the traumas and the tragedies that are going on in the world. And it's all okay. There's no reason to try and repress it, to try and push it down or cover it up. There's no reason to judge yourself or to judge anybody else for that reaction. But your invitation, because you're in this place and you've made a decision that you're trying to live from a higher consciousness, is to then say, okay, what wisdom does Spirit have for me in this? What does my reaction invite me into? All right, so where do we go from here? Unity Minister Eric Butterworth says the most important political action we can take is to hold a vision of a world where love, understanding, and cooperation are the norm. I agree with that because I do believe that our consciousness, that changing that, has ripple effects we cannot even begin to imagine. And I also agree with my friend and fellow Unity minister, Reverend Stacy Macris Ross, who says we can't just sit around on our affirmations. So it's up to each of us to find the balance for ourselves between inner work and outer action. It's up to each of us to tune in to that divine spirit of wisdom that lives and breathes within each of us and discern what is ours to do. So we always start with the inner work. We always start by being brave enough to look within ourselves and see, where am I perpetuating fear and division in my own thoughts and in my own life? It starts there. And then it ripples out into our actions. From what you post on social media, I'll even say to what you like on social media, to what you think, even if you never say it out loud, what you think about your boss or your sister-in-law, to how you treat the cashier at the grocery store. Every action, I invite you to ask yourself, am I contributing to fear and division? Or am I contributing to connection and healing? Because it starts with each and every one of us. And in times of turmoil, our meditation practice becomes that much more important. If we want to raise the energy, raise the consciousness, raise the vibe of the planet, we have to spend daily time raising our own. Because it's not a static thing. When I was a teenager, I thought for sure that one day I would just become enlightened and then nothing would ever be difficult again, right? Because this is the readings that I was doing on Buddhism, that's what it sounded like. And Eckhart Tolle, bless his heart, that's what he says happened for him. And I'm not doubting him, but that's what I wanted, right? One day I would just be changed forever and I would never make a mistake ever again. Oh, if only. But the truth is that our consciousness is fluid. And while we can be in that liminal space of unending peace and love and joy when we're sitting in quiet and meditation, where is that consciousness when someone cuts you off when you're driving? Where's your consciousness then? Because that's our real work. And the more that we raise our consciousness in the safe space of meditation, the more we can bring it into the world and make a true difference. Simple actions, daily practice. That is how we change the world.